Hello everyone and welcome to Tips for Writing the PBL project video. In this video, I'll be going through the format and general guidelines for this paper, things to avoid, different organizational tips, and different APA citation guidelines that you should follow. So the PBL project is a scientific paper, and that includes formal writing, third-person point of view, and a professional voice. It's very important that you include all of your information and all your evidence in a clear and concise way, and that you are presenting only the facts to your reader. You really want to provide all the evidence you can so that you can convince whoever is reading your paper that this is the proper way to go about your topic, or this is the answer to your question. With APA formatting, it's important that you use 1.5 line spacing, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. You probably know the deal from other writing assignments that you've done throughout your life. But I also want to include that with the page requirement, 10-page minimum, 12-page maximum, this actually includes the title page and reference pages. And that way, if you have 8 pages of the main part of your writing, which includes the intro, body paragraphs, and conclusion, and you have 1 page for your title page and 1 page for your reference page, this actually meets the 10-page minimum requirement. I also want to point out that you should include a header with your last name and the page number at the top of your writing. This just kind of goes along with APA formatting, and it helps to keep your paper organized. I also want to point out that there are several writing sources on the middle page for this class, and they include proper citations for APA, parts of a scientific paper, or how to compose a formal style of writing. And if you find you're struggling or you don't know exactly where to go with this paper or how to meet those requirements, those resources are a great tool to use, and they really provide a lot of information for this paper. And the best piece of advice that I have is start your paper early. I'm sure a lot of you already started, which is fantastic, and I love that. And also peer review. That is the best part. The best thing you can do to revise your paper and make sure that you're explaining yourself well, clearly, and that you're using all the format and APA rules as you're going through. It would be awesome if you could share a Google document with a friend and have them read over your paper, and then leave little comments on parts that they were either confused by or concerned about, or things that they thought you could do to improve your paper. It's really important, and I highly recommend that you share your paper with whoever you can. It's definitely a tool that I used a lot when I was writing my paper. I also want to mention a few things to avoid, just because these were mistakes that people have done in the past. So do not use undefined abbreviations when you type out, or when you use an abbreviation or introduce an abbreviation. First start with typing out the entire word, put the abbreviation in parentheses directly after, and then from that point forward, always use the abbreviation. Don't type out the full word again. Sometimes people go through and they type out the full word again just to kind of help meet that word count or help with the 10-page minimum requirement, but you should always use the abbreviation after you've introduced it. Also, avoid opinion when presenting data. I mentioned this before, just because it is a scientific paper and it should be written formally and professionally. You want to sound reliable to your reader. So it's much more reliable if you can present the data and the evidence and prove your point with fact than state your opinions throughout the paper. Also, do not use direct quotation marks, or don't use direct quotes or quotation marks throughout the paper. This is more along the lines of MLA formatting, where you would use quotation marks and quotes. In this paper, you want to read through your research or read through the sources that you have, paraphrase what the author is saying, and then cite the author. Don't copy and paste anything, don't use direct quotes, and then cite it anyway and just forego the quotation marks. It's really important that you understand the material as best as you can and paraphrase it or put it into your own words even in order to help build an argument for your topic. Also, avoid starting numerous sentences and paragraphs with the same phrases and words. This is just general rules for any writing, because it gets to be very boring if you're reading the same thing over and over again and say, like, this person said this and this person did that. Try to mix it up a little bit as best as you can. And I know with some of that, it's going to be hard to avoid because you might be referring to one article a lot and you have to keep citing that source. Also, don't use fluff or filler words to meet the minimum 10-page requirement. Like I said before, be as clear and as concise as you can when presenting the data and when presenting your evidence. It also helps to reduce any confusion that the reader might have when going through your paper if you're restating the same piece of information over and over again in different ways. Also, organization. So I included organization to first talk about the body paragraphs because I found that when I was writing, it's easier for me to go through, get all my facts down, all my evidence down, and get the bulk of my paper down before going through and writing the introduction and the conclusion paragraphs. This is just a tactic that I recommend using, but if you know what works for you, definitely use your best ability and best judgment to write this paper however works best for you. So with the body paragraphs, make sure that you include your background information first. With this, it would be along the lines of maybe the importance of a paper, and it's still, while it's still good to include that sports provide a lot of revenue and they're very popular for spectators and businesses to take part in, that's not a neuromechanics or biomechanic motor control related topic, and it shouldn't be the main focus of your paper. But yet that information is still important and still relevant to what you're talking about. And it's good to introduce that to the topic. It's also important that you assume your reader knows nothing or very little about your topic, because you want to explain the basics of what you're going to be talking about first before you get into the really nitty-gritty and heavy research-based information. Also, paragraphs should be organized logically. So if you talk about the kinetics of one part and then you want to talk about the kinematics, maybe consider separating those two. Or if you want to talk about kinematics and kinetics and then talk about something else, feel free. I've noticed that as people go along, even after they've written their outline, they still go back and change the organization based on new evidence they've found as they've continued writing and researching, or just for what they found works better. So I think you'll find what works for you as you go through, but if you have any organizational issues or any issues with anything else in your paper, definitely feel free to reach out to any one of us as you're going through. I found with my paper that headings really helped me to stay organized, that if I last minute changed my mind to talk about one part of my paper before talking about another, it was easy to just take every paragraph that related to that heading and move it all at once. That's what helped me. It's not required for an APA formatted paper or scientific paper, but that's just one thing that I recommend. But you don't have to include that. It's also important that your first sentence for every paragraph or every few paragraphs is a topic sentence that includes what you're going to be referring to throughout that section. This will also help you stay organized so that you know, okay, that I want to be talking about this, this, and this as I'm going through. And it also helps your reader know where you're going with the paper as well. I also want to mention that Dane sent out an email after the outline saying that the main things the main things to focus on are to mainly write about neuromechanics related topics and to not summarize research articles. And with the not summarizing research articles, I want to highlight that you should read the article, understand what it's talking about, but not say, oh, these are their methods, this is what they did. It's more along the lines of, this is what they concluded from this research, and this relates to my topic, and this relates to my question, how? And you explain that throughout your PBL paper. So with the organization of the introduction and conclusion, I want to mention that the introduction should include the topic importance, and this could be like the prevalence of a disease or prevalence of an injury or the popularity and revenue of a certain sport that you will be talking about in your paper. Like I said before, a scientific paper is written in third-person point of view, so don't use anecdotes. I know that a lot of you chose topics that are very important to you and very meaningful to you, and that's amazing, that's fantastic. But an anecdote shouldn't be included in a scientific paper. So you don't need to say why you chose your topic, just talk about why it's important. With the conclusion, you want to restate your topic, why it's important, and provide an answer to your question. So after you've presented all this data, what were the results? What was the answer, or is there no answer to your question? What did you find out? Summarize the main points that you've referred to throughout your paper, and your conclusion sentence or your last few sentences should be hinting at future improvements. So if you're talking about new surgeries for ACL repair, maybe explain how this can be promoted if it's more beneficial, how this can be promoted and used more widespread for the injured athletes. Okay, so citations. APA and citations can be a little bit tricky and a little bit messy, but they're important nonetheless. So in-text citations, which are a little bit easier, include, if you're including an in-text citation after a sentence, put the author and the year in parentheses directly after your sentence, and then put a period after that source. The most common mistake I've seen is that most people put a period before they have their source in parentheses, and you want to make sure that you put your period after, just to let the reader know and let anyone else know that's going through your paper that that source goes with that sentence. But if you're mentioning the author in a sentence without putting their name in parentheses, make sure that you include the year directly after their name, just so that you also let the reader know that you are citing someone and citing a specific source from that person. Also, for this paper, you can use et al. For sources with 3 or more authors, and for your in-text citations, you can use the et al. Abbreviation, which just means like one person and they're following colleagues or following authors. Other sources might tell you differently, that you have to include all of the authors in your in-text citation the first time and then use et al. After that. For the purposes of this paper, you only need to include the first name and then et al. If there are several different sources or several different authors. And finally, APA citations for the reference page. This can be the most confusing just because there's a lot going on, but I tried to include the basic format for all of you. This is mostly geared toward website articles that you might find. And if you have other funky sources that might be in like a video or a textbook, or if they're in a PowerPoint, I highly recommend that you check out Purdue OWL if you have one of those more unique sources, because the citation requirements are slightly different based on which source you have. Or if you just want to see more examples of APA citations, or get more information, this website, Purdue OWL, is great to check out.